Hi, my name is Angharad Williams and I'm a clinical research practitioner to District General Hospital in East Anglia. Working as a CRP was a choice for me. I didn't fall into it. Fairly standard example of a CRP. Whilst I was studying a bioscience degree, regenerative medicine, tissue engineering, scientists were expressing their frustration at the difficulties of getting therapies from bench to bedside, time, cost, legislation and not getting into clinical trials. And as a cohort, we were very geared up for medical research, and I decided that clinical trials was the change-making area to be in. My current role is a multi-specialty researcher. I have a portfolio of 12 clinical trials. I'm a PI for one. I have 3 CTIMPs, another one opening tomorrow, a surgical device study, very standard. In our region, I've got to know most of our CRPs through this movement to develop the accredited register. And we have staff with backgrounds in forensics, biomedical science, we've got psychologists, English literature majors, paramedics, radiographers, and these varied backgrounds, they're fascinating. Some have PhDs, some were accredited professionals in their previous careers. There was an interim review of the directory last year that showed roughly 90% of the practitioners on the directory were graduates, 40% of those are postgrads, and 5% of those held PhDs. And a large percentage of them have a research-specific background. So they're very well qualified, experienced people who found their own ways into this research workforce, and that breadth of knowledge, as we've been saying, that they bring to research is a real complement to the nurses in research teams. Nationally, we make up around a quarter of the research workforce, maybe more, and if you include academic institutions, we've then got thousands of really skilled and knowledgeable people working in patient-facing roles who've got to where they are just because they're really good at what they do. So, as Fiona was saying, it's like this accidentally successful community where people have grown and developed in their own individual areas because they filled a need. Unfortunately, this means there's a wide variety of jobs and job titles, and they only really have meaning and recognition in their direct environment, and sometimes not much then. And there's no clear pathway to becoming one if that's what you feel like you'd like to do. For me, I've been really fortunate in my work experience. I've been given every opportunity to develop and train. I felt totally at home in the NIHR Clinical Research Network. I'm in the Eastern region. And while I do have to justify myself in my role a lot, it's all okay. I have had some experiences that just make things really difficult because I'm a practitioner. Just one quick example, last May we were setting up a nephrology study. It's a very well-designed pragmatic study looking at new treatments for CKD patients, which is a cohort desperately in need of new treatments. Really good study, ready to open, and the trial team said, oh, actually you can't go on the training because you're not a nurse. I had my own part to play in that because my CV was rubbish. So I updated my CV, started a dialogue with the CIs, and then, yes, I could run the study. It's very successful, but there was a lot of frustration and a lot of time and a bit of panic because there was no one else who could run it. My line manager was very frustrated, in her words. She allocates trials to the most suitably experienced staff, not whether they're nurses or not. She didn't like that being challenged. That trial team are fantastic. It's one of the best studies I've worked on. There were no prejudices, just a lack of awareness. They hadn't heard of a CRP. So if the title CRP was recognised, my competencies of training were proven because I'm accredited, a lot of time and trouble would have been saved, and that's not just a one-off event. So this whole process to develop the accredited register, as Fiona was saying, it's put a lot of focus on our workforce, which is really good, and it has now ensured there is that standardised job title that describes exactly what we do. We have clinical training as research specialists, and we're practising our specialism at a professional standard. No matter where you work or how you got there, one day, if your staff say they're a CRP, people will instantly recognise what your staff do. Also, this massive piece of work in creating the draft standards can then give you a framework to ensure that only suitably competent staff are working in that patient-facing role. That's very important for your patient safety and the integrity of your clinical trials. Also, the continued structure into workforce training and development may be led by leading practitioners. You can then ensure high standards are kept up, and you can retain some of these really experienced staff because there is a career progression pathway developed in the portfolio. Also, there's a scope of practice document, and that makes it very clear where our limits lie. It's really important. It helps to make us aware of our limitations. We're just hopping into the NHS quite often. But actually have learnt that the bigger issue in that is being able to say no. When you're in a workforce where you're constantly having to justify your right to be there, it's very hard to say, no, I'm not the one to do that. So there's protection for your clinical research practitioners as well. Attending national meetings throughout this whole movement has meant I've heard a lot of stories from clinical research practitioners around the country. I've learned a lot about prejudices that we face, and I've been on the receiving end myself. And it would be polite to stop there, but I'm not going to. Because this is what your research workforce face day in and day out in some areas. I've been told quite forcefully that just because CRPs are practicing at bands 5, 6 and 7, it doesn't mean they should be. We should be HCA level only because we're not nurses. We shouldn't be unsupervised with patients because we're not nurses. We shouldn't be called clinical. We shouldn't be working on CTIMPs. We shouldn't be on the same pay band as nurses. And we shouldn't be leading on any studies. All sorts. I think the most comical one for me was that clinical research practitioners as a group lack compassion. So this is sort of a really important point for me, quite passionate point of why we need this register. We can just prove we're competent enough to be here. All the comments that we face will just be counted with the registration. Because it's fears that these staff are facing about this unregulated workforce, and they'll be put to rest. Because I think that's where the prejudice come from. They're not just unpleasant, it's just fear. So I hope that gives you a personal reflection on why I think we need the register, why we really need to support people to get on it, get it going, and why we need it quite soon.